Wonderful. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you so much to the Kirby Center for allowing me to join you all this morning. I'm very honored and excited to be here and welcome everybody. And I really want to thank and acknowledge you for stepping up, participating, and stepping into this world of having conversations around end of life and end of life planning. It really is important conversation that we need to be having, that a lot of us are not having with our families, our loved ones, our circles of support. So I'm hoping today to shed a little bit of light on how to engage the conversations, what your conversation should look like. So having said that, let us...
Kathleen, before we get started on your presentation, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement.
Oh, pardon me. I'm so sorry, Colleen. Of course, go ahead.
That's okay, no worries. I know we're all excited to hear your information, but before we begin, we like to do a land acknowledgement to start. So as we gather here today, it's vital we remember the peoples who've gathered here for millennia. This is the Treaty 7 land of the Indigenous peoples of Southern Alberta, the Blackfoot Nations of Siksika, Piikani, Go'ani, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda Nations of Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley, and the historic home of the Northwest Métis and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. It is with the goal of reconciliation that we acknowledge the land on which we gather, and we thank the elders of these nations for their timeless contributions to this land. And again, welcome everyone. We're very excited to hear the presentation this morning. Thank you very much for joining us for how to have the difficult conversation about end of life. Part of Kirby Center's ongoing series of online presentations on health and wellness, education, mental well-being, entertainment, and information presentation series. For those of you who've joined us this month, you're aware that we have offered several presentations in recognition of Advanced Care Planning Day, April 16th. We have presented on the importance of having a personal directive and goals of care for yourself at your end of life to ensure your wishes, having your will and your estate laid out, to ensure your estate is handled as you would wish. Now that you have all of those things in place, how do you have the very difficult conversation with your loved ones about your plans and wishes once you are gone? We're very pleased today to welcome Kathleen Kellner, founder of Empowered Endings Collective. An extensive travel career specializing in international adventure travel, combined with love of learning about people and cultures, led Kathleen on a path of exploring end-of-life practices, ceremonies, and rituals in other countries and cultures. A subsequent 20-year career as an event designer allowed Kathleen the opportunity to create bespoke and beautiful social events, some of which I've participated in. A chance meeting in 2015 turned into an opportunity to work with Elegant Tributes Funeral Home as a life celebration specialist. Kathleen quickly realized that she had found her true calling and was deeply honored to be able to assist families in creating and delivering meaningful and memorable life celebrations. Since that time, Kathleen has become a certified end-of-life doula and most recently a certified funeral celebrant. As her role as an end-of-life service provider has changed and grown, Kathleen has become to realize that there is much work to be done in changing the narrative around dying and death by encouraging important discussions like the ones we'll be having today. Kathleen, your work sounds so meaningful. I agree with you wholeheartedly that we need to reduce the stigma and angst around having the conversation. It's difficult enough for us to face the inevitable. So how do we plan effectively? And how can we get more comfortable about talking to our loved ones about our wishes?
Thank you so much, Colleen. And my apologies again for jumping the gun. I'm just so excited to be able to talk to you all today.
And we're excited to hear about
it. Wonderful. So can I go ahead now, Colleen? Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. And again, thank you to Colleen and thank you to the Kirby Center for allowing me to have this opportunity. I honor and acknowledge all of you for being able to step up and participate and get past a little bit of that hesitation and fear that we all feel when we approach topics about end-of-life conversations. So as Colleen mentioned, my name is Kathleen Kellner. I am an end-of-life consultant, an end-of-life doula, and a certified funeral celebrant. You're probably most familiar with the role of a funeral celebrant. I am a secular celebrant. I work with families, creating generally fairly non-traditional memorial and celebration events. I love being able to learn about a family's loved one and bring in elements of their personality to the celebration. There's absolutely time for mourning and grief, but there is also an emphasis on celebrating the fact that they were here and the life that they lived while they were here. So I absolutely love being a part of being able to create those events for families. As an end-of-life doula, my role in that world is being a non-medical support service for families, generally when they are dealing with a family member, a loved one who is nearing the end of their life. As people are becoming more aware of options and alternatives, there are many more people choosing to go home or be at home with their loved ones when they die. And of course, that involves a whole other group of supports and systems that need to be in place to allow that to happen. So I will often work with families and give them the information and provide them the guidance they need to make that experience as meaningful and comfortable as possible for everybody. An evolution of these two roles has become what I'm referring to as myself as an end-of-life consultant. What I've really begun to realize is that there are so many gaps in our system, our palliative care system, our end-of-life care, our after-death care systems, that people are looking for information, they're looking for guidance. They're looking to start these conversations long before they are in a place of crisis. And as we all know, when somebody dies or is dying, it turns our world upside down. And so a really big part of what I'm doing is encouraging people to start these conversations long before you're in that situation, which will allow you the time and the space to be able to make the really careful and thoughtful decisions around your end-of-life plans. So Empowered Endings Collective, as I said, kind of came to be based on my experience as a celebrant and a doula. I really feel very strongly about empowering people to have control of as much as they can as they prepare to depart from this world, empowering them in making plans, in making decisions, in expressing their wishes to their loved ones, to their circle of support. And the collective part of my business is I'm finding as I'm walking this journey, I am meeting so many amazing people who offer all kinds of different types of support for people on these journeys. So I often act as an agent in working with families to connect with with people that they need in their world. I don't necessarily sit vigil with families anymore. I have other doulas that I work with that will provide different levels of care. I do not have a medical background, but some of the doulas that I work with do have that, and families are definitely much more comfortable with having somebody with medical knowledge to be with them in those times. So the collective part for me is really about building this community of support for all kinds of interesting elements of end-of-life care. Every client I meet has unique needs. They have a unique family situation, and part of the experience is really learning and digging into the details and figuring out how I can best support them in their journey. So today, what I'm really going to be doing is giving you an overview about the conversations you should be having, about how to maybe approach those conversations. I'm really not going to speak specifics because, as we know, there can be a lot of differences between the provinces, between states and countries as to what the regulations and the rules are, terminology, all kinds of things. So at this point today, my goal is just to have a really broad conversation about things. And a really important part of your work in participating in this is being able to do some homework to start to research and understand. Hopefully a lot of you have already started this journey, but if you haven't, I really encourage you to get online, look around, start asking questions, start seeing what the options are in your area, because I guarantee you will probably find information that you didn't know existed, and you may find some new options and some new information. So I really encourage people to do a lot of homework when they start this conversation, or before they start the conversation with loved ones, to do your own homework. Death anxiety versus death literacy. We really live in a very death phobic culture. People don't want to talk about it. I find it always very interesting when I'm in a social environment when, you know, the topic comes up in conversation. So what do you do? When I share with people what my job is, I get two very different reactions. I either get people who just give me a look of, you know, deer in the headlights and change the topic of conversation or just flat out leave, or I get people who are instantly intrigued and want to launch into very in-depth conversations about their own experiences, about family experiences, about their wishes. So we definitely have a very mixed, I get a very mixed response from people. A big part of what I want to do is bring more death literacy into our everyday world. The idea of talking about these difficult conversations brings about control and reduces anxiety and really, really helps us to move forward in being able to make decisions and be really, really clear. So I'm very much about death literacy. As we're learning with mental health, the more we are able to discuss things, acknowledge and talk about things, the more we can move forward and be better prepared and be more productive in our world. So that is a big part of my goal with Empowered Endings. Here, I love these numbers. They always kind of make me chuckle, but not. It really tells the story. Some interesting statistics around having end-of-life conversations. 93% of Canadians really think that it is very important to have these conversations, but generally only about 36% do. A lot of people don't know how to start the topic. Their loved ones may not want to talk about it. They keep putting it off for another day. We can do that another time. And a lot of times that another time doesn't come. And then they end up in a situation of turmoil and chaos for not having had those conversations. 80% of us think it's really important to discuss our wishes with our healthcare provider, but only about 8% actually do it. And unfortunately, I really realized that a lot of this is due to the fact that many of us don't have a family doctor anymore. If we're lucky, we're part of a practice, but we see a variety of doctors when we go to see them. Our medical care is very much divided. We see different specialists for different things. We don't really have somebody that is sort of doing an overview of our whole health situation that we can maybe talk about the big picture with, which is, again, why I strongly advocate for people to be able to clearly understand their situation, to advocate for the care that they're looking for, to understand what their options are, and to document very clearly what their wishes are. And lastly, this one actually always kind of shocks me. 66% of us think it's important to discuss our end-of-life work with a lawyer, but only about 7% of us do it. I think a lot of people probably have a will. You might have one kicking around that you had written up maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I just had this conversation with a relative of mine, and she informed me that her will is in her freezer in her home, but she hasn't looked at it for about 10 years, and she knows already that there's stuff on it that she doesn't want or isn't relevant anymore, but she just hasn't got around to pulling that thing out of the freezer and defrosting it and getting it updated. So I strongly suggest, first of all, do not keep your will in your freezer, and second of all, make sure that you are keeping it up to date. There are options now. You can go to Staples and buy a will kit. You can go online and download a will kit and then keep electronic copies of it as well. It's so much easier now to access this information and to be able to document it. So I strongly suggest, if you don't have a will, at the very, very least, if you hear nothing else today, please get some form of a will, write it up and put it somewhere safe, and at least have that. These are the conversations that you should be having. what we're just going to be discussing today. Your legal and financial, your administrative type conversations, medical, but really with a focus on what your values and beliefs are around your medical care. What would you want for end of life care? Are you more focused on quality of time over quantity of time? What measures would you want to have taken? A lot of us, again, have very clear ideas and opinions, but we haven't taken the step of documenting that information. Final wishes. The funeral industry has evolved and changed and is constantly changing, and there's an amazing range of options and ideas and things that you can do. And again, a lot of people will share with me exactly what their final wishes are. But my first question to them is, have you told anybody, and have you written it down? And the majority of the time, the answer is no. We're going to talk about the important stuff, which I'll get into a little bit more. It's the stuff that maybe a lot of people think is the least important. I personally think it is the most important. And then we're going to talk about the stuff that everybody forgets about, and that generally becomes the very difficult stuff to manage when somebody has died. Legal and financial. I mean, again, I'm going to touch on this all very briefly. I strongly suggest that if you don't have a will, that you please get some form of a will and put something in place, because if you're not aware, dying interstate, which is without a will, is a very complicated thing. Even if you don't think you have a lot of assets, even if you're renting a home and you have an older vehicle and whatever, if you die without a will, basically everything becomes frozen and goes to the probate court, where an executor is appointed, and that process can take a very long time, and it can be a very drawn out process. When you have any changes in your personal situation, a marriage, death, addition of a grandchild or a child in the family, this is exactly the time that you should be going back, reviewing your information, updating it, and ensuring that your wishes are the same as they were previously, or if they're not, then update them. I strongly believe that your executor should have a copy of your current will. A lot of times people will leave it with a lawyer, but unfortunately, when somebody dies, there can be a process, a time of being able to get access to the lawyer, to get access to the will. I've seen this in a number of situations. So whoever your executor is should really have a copy of your current will. And an enduring power of attorney is also something that a lot of people, it's a very touchy subject to approach with loved ones, because what it is giving somebody that they trust the authority to make financial decisions on their behalf if they lose capacity. So obviously this is a very delicate conversation, but also an incredibly crucial one, because if it isn't a conversation that is had before that person loses capacity, again, the legalities around it become so much more complicated. Medical, excuse me. This is such an interesting topic. I mean, I can talk for a long time about medical and the medicalization of dying, and how we are not necessarily losing control of our end of life experience, but it's definitely changed a lot. Only 10% of us die suddenly in, a traumatic accident or a heart attack or something like that. 40% of us actually have a predictable death. And what that means is you are given a diagnosis, and generally when you're given a life-altering diagnosis, there is sort of a prediction of how much time that you have. We all hear the wonderful, amazing stories of people who outlive their diagnosis by months or years, and that is always really exciting to hear. But we don't often hear about the stories of people who are given a diagnosis and die before or within that time. But I mean, a predictable death allows us the opportunity, the luxury of being able to have that time and to make those preparations that are needed. 40% of us experience a slow or stuttering decline. This is generally, as we age, we're all aware that our bodies are starting to change and things happen. And a lot of times when I'm working with a family, they will tell me about their elderly loved one and how, it just seems to be one thing after another, and we just get them through a medical situation and then something else happens. And that is what would be referred to as a slow or stuttering decline. So it's just the body slowly, shutting down, and it can happen over months or even years, but it is part of the process of dying. What I tell my families all the time, the very worst place to have end-of-life conversations is in the hallway of a hospital in a time of crisis. But unfortunately, this is exactly where a lot of families are having these conversations. Everybody sort of avoided the topic, didn't want to discuss it, and then a crisis arises and we gather in the hallway, and there we are trying to figure out what the plan is. And added to the stress of the situation, we are now trying to make some really important decisions on behalf of our loved one. So I, again, strongly encourage having these conversations will avoid this exact situation. As Colleen had mentioned, and I know she's done some presentations around Advanced Care Planning Day, which did just occur on April 16th in Canada. It's a day that I always encourage my clients to mark on their calendars, because I think it's a great day if you have a plan in place to pull it out, to review it, to make sure that your goals of care and all of the things you have documented are still what you are wishing and hoping for. If you don't have an advanced care plan, I would encourage you, this is a day, I know we've just passed that date, please don't wait till next year to do it, but start making your advanced care plan, documenting things. A personal directive is a very, very crucial and important document that we should all have. In Alberta, you appoint a substitute decision maker, which is referred to as an agent. In other provinces, they have different terminology, but basically it's somebody who knows your wishes, who will honor your wishes, and who can make decisions for you when you are incapacitated and unable to. Hopefully you are all aware of the green sleeve in Alberta. I know there are similar tools in other provinces. The green sleeve is something that it still shocks me how many people don't know about it. It's got the advanced care directive, but it also has some really helpful information about how to fill out that directive. It has a little brochure about the different categories of goals of care. And it's a really great tool if you're looking to start a conversation. First of all, review it yourself, make sure you clearly understand it, and then utilize it as a tool with your loved ones to engage them in these conversations. There's also other really great tools out there. This one is a little abrupt for some people, but it's one that I bought online. It's a book called I'm Dead, Now What? And it's a little harsh, I will guarantee give you that, but it is a wealth of information. It's a blank book with about 65 pages. You may not necessarily fill out every page in it, but it really gives you a very, very good overview of all of the things that you should be addressing and thinking about. Even if you don't talk about it with anybody else, if you write it down in that book, it will be a massive resource for your family when they need it. Final wishes and body disposition. As we're all aware, funerals are very expensive. A traditional funeral can be anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 and upwards. Obviously, you can spend as much as you want to. I heard recently about somebody who spent about $75,000 on a funeral. It is personal wishes. You know, some people prepay them. They know exactly what they want. They picked out their casket. They picked out their flowers. That is awesome and fantastic. What I don't like is when people haven't made those choices and the family is in a position where they're sitting in the funeral home in front of a funeral director and trying to make these really important decisions and trying to decide what mom or dad would have wanted. And nobody is really thinking about the money. I mean, so many people have told me stories of, you know, coming into a funeral home, making plans, making decisions, not really adding up the numbers, and then getting sticker shock basically when they're presented with the invoice, which generally happens immediately after the funeral service. So, you know, you're in a time of grief, you're in a time of shock. That is, again, not the time to be making these really important decisions about your loved one's final wishes. we're fascinating. What's happening in the funeral industry in Canada is that there is a massive shift in people choosing cremation over burial. I was just looking at numbers recently, and we're at a rate of about 74% of people making the choice to have cremation rather than a traditional burial. And this is occurring for a number of reasons. Unfortunately, COVID, I think, has pushed that number higher than ever before because people weren't able to gather to have the traditional viewings and funerals and things that they were having. But people are also becoming much more aware of the environmental impact of traditional funerals, the resources, the chemicals, everything that goes into a traditional burial, and are maybe looking for alternatives. There are a couple of fascinating alternatives, neither of which are currently available in Canada or in Alberta, unfortunately. Aquamation, if you have heard about it or haven't heard about it, is a form of water cremation, and it is more eco-friendly than traditional cremation. I find it fascinating that the first place in Canada that started doing aquamation was in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. I know it's currently, they're looking at making it legal in British Columbia. I don't know where we are in the process in Alberta, but I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be a number of years before we see it. We just opened in Calgary a green burial cemetery, which is very different from the traditional cemetery in that you can be buried in a shroud. You don't need to be in a casket or a vault or any of those things. And there are more and more people looking for those options and wanting to know how to access them. They're out there, you have to look for them. Again, it does depend where you live, but it's certainly worth doing a little bit of research and understanding what is best for you and what you want and learning if it's accessible or not. The other fascinating thing, I follow a lot of end-of-life accounts on social media all over the world, and every day I am surprised and sometimes shocked by what I'm seeing and reading. People are choosing to memorialize their loved ones in a very wide variety of ways. Cremated remains, referred to as cremains, can be buried in the roots of a tree. You can be made into a diamond. You can be placed in an underwater reef, and actually even you can be placed into fireworks, and you can literally go out with a bang with a fireworks show. These are just some of them. I mean, I could probably spend an hour talking about the different ways. I was reading something this morning about somebody saying they're trying to figure out how they can be blasted out into space. So again, there are so many different options. There's so many different ways that you can be memorialized and your family can memorialize you. And I'm a huge advocate of really understanding the person and doing something that is directly connected to them as a form of memorialization. My kids already know that when I go, they are going on a trip to Atutaki in the Cook Islands and leaving me hopefully on a beach somewhere or in the ocean, although I may actually now want to be half there and half in the mountains in Banff and Kananaskis, but I may have to pull out my end of life plan and make that revision. But yeah, to me, it's not so much about my ashes. I honestly don't even really care if they take my ashes there. What I really want is for them to go to my favorite place in the world and have some kind of a sunrise or sunset ceremony and remember and honor me and have that memory for their life. So that is, I'm very passionate about being able to ensure that people are able to create those memories and come away from a memorial event with not just the sadness and the grief, but the feeling of being so thankful for that person and their life and carrying that memory with them. So final wishes are really important. One thing that I was hearing a lot of, especially unfortunately during the pandemic, was people were not able to have ceremonies, funeral celebrations, or people are now saying, well, no, I don't want anything. You know, when I die, just have me cremated and put my ashes in the ground or wherever. What I say to those people is when you die, it obviously doesn't matter to you what happens. So I understand maybe you don't really care, but it is so important for your loved ones to be able to gather in person, online, whatever that looks like. It is such an important part of the grieving process to be able to have that time, to have that space, and to share with each other, to share memories, to cry together, to laugh together. It is really a hugely important part of the process of grief and grieving. And it's one that we're really missing in our society, and especially since the pandemic. I had a personal experience where I've lost two loved ones, and I still have a feeling of unsettlement about not having had the opportunity to honor them and to acknowledge their departure. So yeah, when people tell me they're not interested, they don't really want anything, I always say to them, it's not for you, it's for the people that you're leaving behind. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be expensive, it just has to be something. And it can be very, very simple and very quick, but it's truly important to have that opportunity and that space. These are the important things, I think. These are the things that a lot of people sort of maybe put at the bottom of the list. I honestly think they should be at or near the top of the list. The heartfelt stuff. Documenting, storytelling, documenting family history. There is an opportunity, you know, as I mentioned, we have the opportunity to have the conversations with somebody who is nearing the end of their life, to have them to tell you the stories, write them down. There are books, again, that you can purchase that you can actually document family stories, and they'll give you prompt questions so you can ensure that you're gathering that family history from the keeper of that history before they depart. Reviewing photographs and noting names and dates. I just went through this with a great aunt not that long ago, and she had beautiful, beautiful photographs. She was 99 and a half when she died. And it was very sad because a lot of us didn't know the people in the photographs. We didn't know the context. We didn't know anything about it. They really were, we couldn't connect with them. And it made me really sad to not be able to understand some of the family history that was there for me. So again, if you have the opportunity, spend some time. It's a wonderful way to connect, to reminisce, to help somebody remember really important things in their lives, and help you to document them and carry that information forward to your family. Things like family heirlooms, and I'm not talking about, you know, the stuff in the will, who's going to get the house and the car and all the rest. These are the little things, but these are the really important things. Things like maybe a treasured piece of jewelry. It may not be the biggest, most flashiest piece of jewelry, but maybe there's a really touching and meaningful story. I have a piece of jewelry from my great grandmother that I treasure. And not that I wear it, I don't, I keep it in my jewelry box, but when I pick it up, I connect. I feel connected to my family history in knowing that this piece has been in my family for a long, long time. Simple, you know, a record collection. That is something that people are starting to get back into records again. And, you know, whereas before we used to think it was something that was just an annoying thing to try to get rid of, there are people who treasure these items, and maybe somebody in your family that really treasures them. Having the conversations and understanding who really will want and treasure these items that you have makes it easier and better when you want to pass it down. Things like handmade quilts are a, you know, part of a family heirloom. They don't have to be the most expensive things. They just have to be the most important things to you. And you want to make sure that they go to the people who will treasure them the most. A favorite recipe. This is always a good one. A lot of us have a family recipe that is at every family gathering on the table. I heard a story, I don't know if it's true or not, about a woman who had a very famous cookie recipe, and her family went so far as to actually put that recipe on her headstone at her funeral plot. I don't know if that's true. I would like to find out for sure if that's a true story or not. But maybe I wouldn't go quite that far, but I really think it's a little thing, and it's something that if maybe you make a copy of that recipe, handwritten or whatever, and every time a family member pulls out that recipe to make it, they think about you And it's, again, carrying on that family and that tradition. These are little details, but they are the important details. They are the details that will stay with your family for a very long time. Final messages and letters to loved ones. This is something, again, that I personally find to be very important. Some people really resonate with it and want to do it, others do not. I just had my youngest child turn 18, and I had, when they were children, I would write them a letter on their birthday for every year for 18 years. And then I gave them all their letters when they were 18. My 18-year-old son wasn't particularly impressed with his stack of letters, I do have to say, but I do hope at some point he will go back and revisit those and read them and understand the message of his mom and how important it was for me to be his mom, and the things that he was going through every year when I was writing the letter, the achievements, you know, that type of thing. And again, with end of life, if you have information, if you have messages, if you just have words of love and support for family members, it is beautiful and wonderful to be able to write them down and leave them with your loved ones. And when they're missing you and they're feeling sad or they're feeling lonely, they can pull them out and reread them and feel like a part of you is with them. This is, again, a beautiful gift. A lot of us have the opportunity to create these gifts before we leave, but a lot of us are putting it off. We'll do that another day, later, sometime, and we don't always get around to doing it. So my biggest question with the heartfelt stuff is, what do you want your legacy to be when you're gone? What do you want your family to remember you for? And that is really important, and that is part of this heartfelt stuff that we should be documenting. This is, I'm sorry, I always have to look up the pronunciation on this word because I always forget. It is called, it's the Swedish art of death cleaning. And I personally am a very big fan of it. It is dostadning, it's called. I mean, this is a bit of a funny cartoon. Sadly, it's funny, but it also is reality. I see so many people who are dealing with exactly this situation. They've lost a parent usually, and not only are they dealing with their grief and the legal and all the rest of it, they are dealing with a lot of stuff. And people are reluctant to start looking at their stuff and clearing it out. The Swedish art of death cleaning is a philosophy that basically says from about the age of 65 on, you really focus on downsizing your belongings and giving them away, you know, passing them along to family members, doing something with them so your family is not left with this particular situation. And it's also an opportunity to sort out the good, important stuff from the stuff that is just taking up space. So some people find this to be a little abrupt. I think it's a beautiful concept. And I think it's something that it is a gift to our families that we can be able to do that for them. There's a lot of stuff that we don't really think about. And these are things that turn into, they might be little things, but they can turn into actually quite big things after somebody has died. A lot of us are living a lot of our lives online these days, more and more all the time. And your digital footprint can include such things as social media accounts. It can include your email accounts, maybe a website for a business or something that you've created, blogs, all of that kind of stuff. I don't know the exact number, but I believe the majority of us have about 60 to 70 online presences, whether that's an account or a membership or, you know, being part of an email distribution. So we're living a lot of our lives online. And when somebody dies, something needs to happen with this stuff. Somebody has to manage these accounts. With things like Facebook and LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram, they do have something in place which is called having a legacy contact. And what that means is that when you pass away, you can designate somebody before you die to be your legacy contact. They can go into your account. They do need proof, death certificate in order to access the account. But they can go in and either delete all of your accounts, completely remove you, or they can turn your page into a memorial page. And I'm seeing this happening more and more often. And I personally really like the idea of a memorial page. I have lost a couple of people, and I find comfort in going back and looking at their Facebook and looking at photographs, and even being able to see things that they've written and comments that they've made. It's almost like pulling out a photo album, being able to go back and revisit some memories with them. So I really like the memorial page. Some people may not. They might want to just shut everything down and be removed. But unless you have your legacy contact in place, nobody else can touch your Facebook page. So you need to ensure that. I just had a situation, a very heartbreaking situation with somebody who passed away. It was an expected death. The conversations were not had. And unfortunately, nobody had their password for their phone. Their phone contained some very important photographs, a lot of important photographs. Nobody could figure out how to access the phone because nobody knew the security code. Thankfully, I think it took about a year, but thankfully a family member kept trying it and was eventually able to figure out a password and did eventually get access. But if you can't figure out that password, Apple is not going to open that phone for you. There is nothing you can do. That information, whatever is on that device, same with a laptop, whatever is on that device, unless you have the passwords, you are not gaining access to it, and you can lose some really, really valuable information. So again, documenting it, writing it down, sharing it with at least one person that you trust is a really important part of thinking about what will happen when you're not here. Things like memberships and subscriptions online and retail accounts like Amazon. There's a lot of personal information being held in these accounts. So we really want to make sure that when we're gone, somebody has access to them, to go in, to shut them down, to remove the information and ensure that identities aren't being stolen or anything like that. Charities with automatic donations. A lot of us set up donations for charities that we support, and those just keep on rolling through. When you die, they don't necessarily know, and they don't quit taking your charitable donation. So that is something that people really need to think about and make sure there is a plan for when somebody dies, so that your family is not trying to figure out what they're going to do or how to stop the debits from coming out of the account. The other thing I've heard about, and this is a little thing, and I just read a story again recently about cell phones and somebody having a cell phone and not being able to either cancel that plan because it's on a contract, or not being able to change the name on the plan. And it's a little thing, but it becomes a really big thing when you can't change the name on a phone and you can't cancel a phone. So again, it's a little thing. It's something none of us really think about, but it can become a really difficult thing to manage for the person who is managing your affairs after you die. Who do you talk to? This is always a tough one. Some of us know right away who our go-to person is, who it's going to be. It doesn't necessarily always have to be our spouse or a partner. It can be a child, it can be a dear friend. There's a lot of people in your circle. The most important thing is it has to be somebody that you trust 100% wholeheartedly to honor your wishes and who has hopefully the same values as you do. Make sure you choose carefully when you're choosing your agent for your medical as well as your executor or executors. You can choose multiple agents as well, just in case you're wondering. So you can have a primary and a secondary agent for your medical directive. Same with executors, although I will say that having more than one executor can make it a much more complicated process, especially if they don't see eye to eye and agree with everything. So choose carefully. Make sure that you are really clear in why you're choosing them. Don't just choose them because you think you have to. Make sure you are choosing really carefully. And let them know that you're choosing them. Have the conversation before you document it. Run it by them. Make sure that they are fully aware of the commitment and the responsibility around being your executor or your agent. Some people may choose to decline, to graciously decline being designated because they don't feel prepared to be able to honor that role with you. So again, let them know, have the conversation, and make sure that they are really aware. Being an executor is a much more complicated process now than it ever used to be, and it can be a year or more long commitment for somebody to help deal with the estate and close everything off. So you really need to make sure that they understand what their commitment is. I also recommend that you review your choices. If you've chosen an agent, you should review your personal directive with them. Again, giving you the opportunity to have the conversations, to make sure that you are on the same page, that you are clearly understanding each other, and as well with the executor, understanding that they have a copy of your will and that they are very clear in what your wishes are. And as I mentioned previously, providing them with copies of relevant documents and keeping those documents current is a really important part of that process. If you're asking them to fill the role, please provide them with the tools that they need in order to be able to do it in a really good way. This is really important. Write it down. And I wrote this down. I cannot stress this enough. I think, as I mentioned previously, I have had so many conversations. As soon as I engage with conversations with new people and share with them what I do, a lot of them will tell me very clearly what their wishes are. And my question to them is, have you had the conversation? Sometimes they say yes. More often they say no. But the other thing I say is, have you written it down? And I'd say the majority of time people say no, that they haven't written it down. There's almost this fear of, if you write it down, you might make it, you make it real, you might make it happen. I can assure you that that is not the case, but writing it down, what will happen is it will give you some peace of mind and some control, and will save a lot of people a lot of grief in the long run. An unexpected death or even an expected death can leave your loved ones in grief and shock and confusion, and there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of stuff happening, and them trying to recall a conversation you might have had sitting beside the campfire at the lake 3 years ago, that's not the time for them to be trying to recall those details and to remember what conversations were had. So by writing it down, you are avoiding miscommunication, you're avoiding people forgetting details. It's just really, really important. The other thing with having documentation, it really helps provide clear direction, and it also helps avoid conflict between family members or loved ones. If not everybody is in full agreement on your wishes, and having them documented will really, truly ensure that your wishes are honored. So it's so very important to make sure that you document them and write them down. Review and update as needed. Again, we've already touched on this a couple of times. I think at least, not at least, probably once a year, no more than once a year. We don't want to be looking at them every couple of weeks, but we really want to make sure that what we're documenting is what we really want. I mean, a lot of things can happen, a lot of things can change. You really want to make sure that what you're documenting is very clear and it's still relevant. Also, having said that, even though you've written something down, if things change, if you end up in a situation, say medically, where you decided you don't want the goals of care that you had previously discussed, you can make that change. Just because you've written it down doesn't mean you have to stick with that plan, but at least having it written down will allow a starting point, a place to start the conversation. And you are absolutely allowed to change your mind and change your plan, but it gives you a point of starting the conversation. And again, when there is a change in your personal life, that is a really good time to pull out those documents, make sure they're up to date, make sure they're current, and make any changes that you feel are relevant and important at that time. What happens when you start the conversation? This is always an interesting one. Be prepared, first of all, before you embark on any conversations. Do your research. Make sure that your loved ones know that you have put a lot of thought and research and time into the decisions and into the information that you're providing them with. It's really, gives them a lot of comfort knowing that you're not just sort of randomly giving them information, but that you've really made a plan. When you sit down with them, have a plan, write it out, create a checklist, create an agenda, do something that will help you stay on track, keep on track, and ensure that you cover the topics that you want to cover. Try not to do it all in one sitting. It's very overwhelming. It can be a lot of information, as we're finding today. So maybe take little bits, one or two topics, and have a conversation around that, and then save the rest of it for another time. Also, I always suggest to people, please don't bombard or blindside your loved ones at Thanksgiving dinner. Make a plan to have a set time to have these conversations that isn't around a family event, your grandchild's birthday party or anything like that. The great thing about now is we can all get on our computers, and even if our loved ones are in another city, we can, get together and have a meaningful conversation and a discussion. So actually set aside the time to have the important conversations. You may experience some resistance or just flat out refusal from some people in your circle of support. A lot of those people are in fear and in denial and don't want to have the conversations. They don't want to have anything to do with them. And that's okay. You can't really force somebody, obviously. You might be able to gently persuade them by assuring them that this is for everybody's benefit and best interest, but they may not, they just may refuse to. And that is sometimes something that happens. In that case, what I tell my people is document it, write it down, keep it somewhere safe. And when the time comes for them to need that information, they will be very, very grateful to have it. Even though they may have not participated in the conversation, they will be very grateful to have the information that you are providing for them. So if nothing else, document it, write it down, and keep it for yourself. Keep it somewhere accessible where your loved ones can find it when needed. What you find on the other side of the conversations, and I will tell you, this is 100% what I find with everybody when we start having these conversations. There is a peace of mind that comes from knowing that you've taken care of these details, that there is a clear understanding, that your wishes have been expressed, that the fact of going through the process allows you the opportunity to really ask yourself what your wishes are and gives you a lot of clarity around what it is you want for yourself. So it is important for yourself personally, as well as for your family members, to have these conversations. And gratitude from your loved ones, even though they might be a little weirded out at first or a little uncomfortable and not really sure why these conversations are being had, when they have time to sit back and reflect on them, they truly will understand what an incredible gift it is that you are giving them, to be able to allow them that when you do die, they have the opportunity to grieve, to feel, to go through all of the emotions without having the complication of having to figure out some really complicated questions and information in the process as well. It truly is a gift to give this to your loved ones as well as to yourself. So I've never had anyone who's embarked on this journey with me who's regretted it. I can tell you that 100%. So again, I very, very strongly encourage you to embark on this process of having these conversations. How myself or somebody such as me can help you, assist you with these conversations. I do work with clients in all stages of end of life planning. I always tell people that I believe everybody over the age of 18 should have some kind of an end of life plan. Most people don't. Teenagers and young people think that they're going to live forever. The really smart ones, actually, I've had some really in-depth conversations with young people. A lot of times it's young people who've lost a parent early in their life because they have been impacted by that, generally a sudden loss and an unexpected loss. So I think it just makes them much more aware of what happens when somebody dies. And yeah, I've had some of my most profound conversations with a couple of young people who lost parents at a very young age. But most of them are pretty, they don't necessarily want to even think about it, never mind document anything around their end of life wishes. I personally love meeting my clients when they are their healthy, happy best, enjoying life to the fullest, maybe retired, maybe semi-retired, whatever the case may be, but I want to meet them in a place where they are able to make really clear decisions, where they can do the work, they can do the research, and really make conscious choices. A lot of times I am working with families who have received a life-altering diagnosis or a family in a time of crisis. I absolutely work with those families as well. And I can certainly, come into a situation and bring some clarity and direction to the situation. I do work with individuals as well as with families, and it really does make a difference sometimes to have a non-judgmental and well-informed person at the table to be able to guide the conversations, to make sure conversations are productive, and to make sure that things are being well documented. So I have included my contact information. I'm hoping I will be able to reach out to all of you at the end of today's webinar, just to provide you with my contact information. If you have questions, if you're looking for resources, by all means, please reach out to me. I'm such an advocate of providing whatever I can to help people to move forward with these conversations. I am 100% willing to share with you whatever knowledge and information that I have. So I strongly encourage you to hold on to my contact information. I am actually just in the process of building my website. Unfortunately, my web developer got sick with COVID, and so my website is still under construction. I'm really hoping to get it up in the next week or two. But in the meantime, I am available on my email or on cell. And yeah, I'm just so willing and wanting to have conversations and helping to guide people. So I encourage you to reach out if you do have questions.
Such great information, Kathleen. You've given me a lot of food for thought. As much as the presentations that we have been doing this month, I thought I was informed. Lots of great information there. Thank you very much for that. And I would also, just before we go into the Q&As here, you touched on just about everything that we did touch upon this month. But if anyone is looking for any further information, as I said, this video will be up on our YouTube channel. We have our presentation that we did on the advanced care planning, the importance of personal directives, goals of care, and green sleeve in depth, and how to go about getting them. And as well as last year, you touched on something that was very important there about how does anybody find your stuff once you're gone. And last year we did a presentation with someone on your digital footprint and how to keep track of those very important passwords and things like that. So I would encourage people to visit our Kirby Centre YouTube channel for any further information, as well as reaching out to Kathleen. Kathleen, if you want to end your screen share there, then we'll open up. There's several questions here for you.
Okay, stop share.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, hi Colleen.
We'll start with the Tammy would like to know, how do you become an end-of-life doula?
There are actually a number of courses being offered across Canada. The one that I took actually was through Douglas College in Vancouver, and it was done online. I did work, I have worked in Calgary though with a local doula. There are a few of us around. It's really becoming a much more popular and very much needed role in end-of-life care. So Douglas College is the program that I took, but I know there's another one out of Ontario. So if you look it up online, I'm sure you can find it. Unfortunately, there isn't anything in person in Calgary yet. Hopefully there will be at some point, but for now, everything is done online.
And Barb would like to know, are there professional agents for those who have no one? Is that something that you, part of your...
Yeah, there are definitely the problem with that, and the part that where I kind of come into play, is a lot of things are sort of piecemealed out. So you will go to your lawyer for your legal stuff. The medical directive in that generally is done through your medical community, your doctor, that type of thing. There isn't necessarily somebody that will oversee everything for you. That is something I have done that for a couple of people who don't have any other support people in their world. It's not a designation, though I don't call myself an agent, but as far as I know, there isn't anybody specifically that is licensed to play that role.
You have good information that you can help people with. Sherry would like to know how to obtain the book, I'm Dead, Now What?
That one actually I bought on Amazon. I quite often will go onto Amazon and Google the topic of end of life books, because there are a ridiculous amount of books on end of life topics. I personally own about 80 of them, but yeah, that one came out actually this winter. It was a new one that appeared that I ordered because I was really curious about it. There's another one I would be really careful of. I did order it and I don't know where I put it. It sort of looked like it was about end of life planning, and when I actually received the book, it was basically a day timer with all blank pages. So yeah, so be careful. I mean, I highly recommend I'm Dead Now What, because this has so much great information. It has stuff that I hadn't even thought about when I started going through it. And even though you may not fill out every page, it will be a priceless resource for people who, when the time comes when they need the information.
So rather than just making notes in a binder or something, that's something that you can.
It's a really good guide. Absolutely.
Excellent. And Anonymous would like to know, to please put up your contact information. You know what, Kathleen, often what we'll do is put your contact in the chat bar. If you'd like to type that in, then anyone can capture that out of the chat bar if they like. And we'll just pop over to some of the questions in chat here. Now, this is something that we talked about before we opened up, Kathleen. Tammy has said she's just learned a new Facebook group starting up called Death Cafe Calgary. You mentioned Death Cafe previously.
Actually, yes, I have attended death cafes prior to COVID, and I've been talking to people within my collective about restarting death cafes. I think they are such an amazing format, an amazing resource of information. The people you get that attend death cafes is incredibly diverse. It's very interesting. It is definitely on my radar to start hosting death cafes in Calgary.
And what is the purpose of a death cafe?
The cool thing with death, there isn't really a set purpose. They started in Europe, and they were just a place for people to gather who had questions, who had an interest in maybe becoming, involved in the end of life industry, for people who are grieving, who want to talk their grief through with somebody. They're just a really open, welcoming space to have dialogue around end of life. And honestly, I think that there is such a need for it because it is such a difficult topic and people are so afraid to talk about it. It's like a safe space for people to be able to talk about end of life. So was that Tammy that you said that?
Yeah, Tammy. Yeah, so
if you message me, I am absolutely looking at hosting a death cafe in the next month or so. So I would love to, if you're interested in partaking or co-hosting with me, please reach out and let me know.
And keep us posted. We can get that out to attendees. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, there was just a couple of comments on in testate. So thank you very much.
Did I put the wrong word in?
That's okay. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention, Brian and Paul. Tammy, do you have a link for that Aqua one?
Oh, Aquamation?
Oh.
There isn't a link per se. If you Google Aquamation, you will find a ton of resources and online information about the process, about the mechanics of it. It is something that is not legal in Alberta because our our law stipulates cremation by fire. It has to be changed to cremation by fire or water. And I don't know, I know there was a couple of people in Alberta that were advocating for that change, but it's a very long drawn out process. I know I have a doula in BC that they are also advocating. They're much closer to having it legalized in British Columbia. I really don't know. I think since COVID, there were a couple of people that were advocating for it. And I think COVID, unfortunately, has kind of sidelined that process. But yeah, if you just Google aquamation, you will find all kinds of information online about it.
And Grace, I'm with you. I wouldn't mind being a diamond, and I do wonder how much that would cost as well. Although I did kind of like the one about the fireworks.
The fireworks one is fun. The diamond one is very expensive. It's a long process, but I've seen it done. I've read articles. I haven't actually seen a person diamond yet, but and I don't know where it can be done in Canada, but I think it's a beautiful, if you can afford it, it's a beautiful way to memorialize somebody.
Just go to Google.
Yes.
And Paul has mentioned, I guess there was a Kay Andrews who'd put a cookie recipe on her Utah gravestone in 2019.
Oh, okay. So you found the actual story. I've heard rumors of that story. I didn't know if it was an urban myth or not. So if you've actually found documentation, that is brilliant. I just think that probably said a lot of.
Sorry, she was 97 years old and her fudge recipe was on the gravestone.
Oh, it's a fudge recipe. Okay, that's right. That is the story I remember hearing. And you know what? It must be pretty darn good fudge. And I don't know, maybe we should find it and share it.
You know, I'm thinking the same thing. Thanks for sharing that, Paul. And Jenny, thank you. Such an amazing amount of information. You're wondering whether Kathleen will share her presentation materials. That would be awesome to have this information as a record. Kathleen, if you feel comfortable sharing your slides, I'll be happy to send them out to everyone.
Okay, well now I feel really bad because when I was putting my slide together, I meant to go back and check because I didn't think that I had the word correct about dying without a will, and I completely forgot to do that. So I may have to go in and edit that.
Do an edit before we send it.
Let me do an edit and then I'll send it to you. Thank
you. Brian and Paul.
Thanks, Brian and Paul.
Jenny, great presentation and knowledge. Thank you. It's unfortunate that she needed to leave. Nicole, Kathleen, I have requested a connect on LinkedIn, or would you be able to reach out by email? I think we gave Kathleen's email there, Nicole, so hopefully you did get that. If anybody misses anything and needs to reach out to Kathleen, by all means, get in touch with me. Janice, I started a spreadsheet with PW/websites, etc. 10 years ago.
Passwords, right?
Passwords. Yeah. It currently contains 102 passwords. I have no idea that I had so many. Granted, they aren't all hugely important. Recipe sites, travel sites, but should be closed, unsubscribed at some point. And that's the thing, you document your passwords, and then the next thing you know, you try to get into something. I can't tell you how many times I forgot passwords.
And you have to change it every 6 months.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, going back to remember to change those passwords you've documented. What is the suggested amount to pay an executor? Is it an hourly rate? An excellent presentation. Thanks, from Brian.
Thank you, Brian. I haven't seen a rate published for an executor. I know a lot of people assume that their family member is going to do it for free, and that used to be the way to do it. But my great aunt that I mentioned, that was 99 and a half when she died. She was single, she lived alone. My mother was her executor, and I can't tell you the number of hours it took for her to close out Auntie Nellie's estate. It was shocking to me how much work was involved. So again, that's why I always tell people to be really careful about who you choose. The cost of an executor, that unfortunately I can't speak to, because it really depends on your specific details and your estate.
I might suggest again that you check out our previous presentations, the one we did with Jonathan Ng on wills and estates recently. Jonathan talked about executor, as I think did Alexandra with our advanced care planning. So I think that you might find some information in there, Brian. Marion, thank you very much for helpful information, very thought-provoking, provoking. Leo, thank you very much for interesting and informative presentation. Sherry, it's been very helpful and informative. Lots of great accolades here. Grace has submitted a link here, eterniva.com/science, 895 for pets too.
Okay, I think that might be the aquamation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the thing with that is because there is no aquamation equipment in Alberta. If you want to choose, actually, no, that's not true. I'm sorry. In Alberta, they can do it for pets. They do have the process available for pets. It's not legal for people. But yes, it is absolutely. I guess I don't know the name of the company, but you can definitely use that. Yeah.
Well, she shared the link. She shared the link there for anyone.
Just to clarify though, she says for pets too, it is only for pets in Alberta, not for people.
Good to know. Norma, sure glad my husband and I attended. Well done, Kathleen. Thank you very much. And lots of great accolades there. Contact info, please. Pauline, we did put Kathleen's, Kathleen did put her email into the chat, if you're able to capture that. And again, if anyone has any problems with trying to reach out to Kathleen, we will make sure to follow up. Oh, we've got a couple more here in Q&A. Oh, anonymous, why did you choose this vocation?
Honestly, it chose me. I stumbled into it through event management and just it completely resonated with me, but it resonated with me in a way where I got a peek behind the curtain of the traditional funeral industry, and a lot of it I didn't enjoy it. The funeral home I worked for was very non-traditional. We were the only all-female funeral home in Alberta. And it just really opened my eyes, and I really started researching and learning and realizing that there was a big space of need for conversation and information. So it absolutely chose me.
And Marietta has some films from the 30s. How can I update these films? Gosh.
Ooh, that is definitely an AV tech question. I actually have a meeting with an AV tech at 1 o'clock today. I could certainly ask him. I know I have seen even people who have family slides and things. There are companies that will transfer that digital media for you. I don't have any names of anyone specifically, but I'm sure if you look online, if you look for digital media transfer services, you should be able to find something.
And things have changed considerably since the last time I delved into it, but I did work with a company called Canada Disc. I think Canada Disc and Tape or something. So there are companies out there that would be able to translate.
And I will say, even though it may be a costly process, it is so worth it, because if you don't capture those memories and those images, eventually the film disintegrates and they're lost forever. You don't necessarily have to do hours and hours of it, but to at least capture some of it is really, really important. It's really valuable information. It's valuable for families to have, for sure.
And you've reminded me of the box of photographs that I have sitting in my basement since I moved, that I've been going to go through and put into some sense for my kids and grandkids with names. So great information. Thank you very much. Unless anyone else has any further questions here. And again, we'll make sure that we get you in touch with Kathleen, and Kathleen, keep us posted on anything new that you have coming up. And